Well, welcome to the latest edition of the Metaphysical Corner. Today is, let's see, it's January 6, 2018, and it's actually kind of something happens today astrologically that is, I didn't even know was happening until I heard about it on the radio driving for work. And what happened was, someone mentioned that we all know, or most of us know, the old song Age of Aquarius by the Fifth Dimension, and the words from it. When the moon is in the seventh house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, is the dawn of the Age of Aquarius. That happens today, on January 6, 2018. Now, it isn't a firm start to the, yesterday was the age of Pisces, today is the age of Aquarius. In actuality, it takes a long time to transition from one age to another. However, the traits of being an age of Aquarius have actually been in, or us trending towards it, have been in effect for some time. And anyway, today, as I said, matter of fact, oh gee whiz, about 3 hours from right now, will be the exact conjunction or meeting of Mars and Jupiter. Their alignment actually happens in Scorpio, by the way. And then 12 hours from now, at 7 o'clock Sunday morning, the moon goes into Leo, which is the seventh house. So at least via the song, it is the start, but it goes much more than that. Now I'm going to read you something, and I normally will not do this, but I think it's very applicable, because I did some research on the Age of Aquarius. I think everyone wants to know what it really means. Aquarius is a very forward-looking sign, very much technology-driven and the like. As one, I'm going to throw something at you before I start reading here of what it really might mean. In that, for example, the internet, which has actually been around with or without Al Gore for a long time. Well, not a long time, 20 years. Excuse me. Is definitely Aquarian age. But we recently had something happen with Congress where they, the net neutrality thing. I think Congress is really stuck, if you will, in the Piscean age, which tends to be like old school. As we transition from, astrologically, as we transition from one age to another, or one sign to another, or things change, those who had power tend to resist the change. They don't want change. Well, that tends to be Republicans in general. That's why they're called conservatives. Well, if things are going to change, whether they like it or not, they can pass all the bills in the world they want. It's still going to happen. It may delay it, but they won't end it. But let me read this to you. And like I said, I normally won't read stuff to you because, some people like stuff read to them. But I think what this guy says in this article is very applicable to understanding the age of Aquarius. Now I have to enter my code here. Hang on a second. And here we go. It's pretty good. It was well written, and that's why I have it here. Imagine the world as it would appear from the perspective of an ant wandering on stage during a performance of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. All around you there unfolds a great drama, replete with exotic colors, sounds, and complex happenings. Yet because of your limited perspective, the meaning of it all escapes you. You cannot comprehend the multi-layer significance of this drama, or grasp how these diverse elements fit into each other and into a greater unfolding story being played out in several acts. And yet only by understanding that larger context could you perceive how these elements are really facets of a greater narrative. In a way, our own predicament is rather like this. We too find ourselves meandering across a great stage that is called history. To the casual eye, the events transpiring around us may seem like a chaotic jumble of random occurrences. A rocket carrying 7 crew members explodes in midair. A world leader finds himself embroiled in a foreign war. A new computer technology suddenly takes the world by storm. At first glance, there is little to suggest that these things possess any meaning or relation to one another. Yet our problem may be simply one of proximity. Perhaps we are just too close to grasp what is going on. If our perspective were broad enough, we would recognize these isolated events as facets of a much greater story. I'm going to stop there just for a second and say that, I'm a historian, but I love history. And I really believe, and historians will tell you this, the further away you get from something in time, the more clearer and in focus it becomes. And I really believe that. We understand much more what happened and why it happened 50 years ago, what happened 50 years ago than when it happened at the time. 50 years from now, what is happening now will be much more obvious as to what was really going on, if you catch my drift. For the esotericist, an important key towards helping unlock that broader perspective is the concept of great ages. We presently find ourselves on the threshold between the Piscean and the Aquarian ages. Like vast tectonic plates shifting deep within the collective unconscious, this epic transition has already begun manifesting as a series of seismic changes throughout the world, as the forms of an older age make way for those of a radically new one. Will the coming era be a time of peace, brotherhood, and love, as the song says? Or will it bring about a police state where men and women become more like cogs in a bureaucratic machine? If history is any guide, the truth will probably be more complex than we can expect or even imagine. There's probably a lot of truth to that. It's useful to remember that the same Piscean age that brought us Jesus Christ also brought us the Inquisition, not to mention the evangelist Jimmy Swaggart. To help us make sense of these unfolding complexities, let's look at a few of the symbols associated with both of these eras. Now, you had the era of Pisces from approximately the year 0 to, well, now and maybe for a few more years. For 2 millennia now, we have been under the influence of the watery sign of Pisces. The exact beginning of the Piscean age is hotly debated, though most would agree that it can be loosely associated with the start of the Christian era. The manifestations of the Piscean age include great rise of a global religion centering primarily on symbols of water, baptism, walking on water, changing water into wine, etc. Indeed, for the student of astrological symbolism, Christianity offers a virtual motherlode of correspondence in connection with Pisces. For example, Christian scripture speaks extensively of fishermen, sympathy for society outcast, martyrdom, and the washing of feet. One of the defining miracles of Christ's ministry was the feeding of the multitude of 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread, according to the Bible anyway. More subtly, the Catholic practice of eating fish on Friday, oh boy, do I remember that well, is sometimes linked with the fact that Friday is governed by Venus, the planet that is exalted in Pisces. Were these correspondences intentional on part of the church fathers, or is it purely synchronistic? Even scholars disagree on this point, and we will never know for sure. Either way, we can study these symbols for what they reveal about the dynamics of time. Viewed as a whole, they suggest that humanity was learning to relate to reality and the divine through a more emotional filter. In its constructive aspect, this brought about a newfound element of compassion and faith in key segments of society, especially in the Christian world. A spiritual sensibility emerged which spoke of turning the other cheek rather than destroying one's enemies. More negatively, the same emphasis on emotionality, and persecution within the emerging religions. Pisces is intensely concerned with matters of faith, but taken to extremes, this can lead to zealotry, self-righteousness, and the urge to establish absolute guidelines for all to follow. Oh, yeah, the world's religions don't do that. At its worst, it was an era of religious intolerance, when large populations were expected to show unquestioning allegiance to a monolithic belief system, as was in the case of Christianity and Islam during this period. One of the more striking Piscean symbols found in Christianity is the crucifixion. It is sobering to consider that for nearly 2 millennia, Western culture has defined itself largely in terms of an image of someone being tortured in a particularly gruesome manner. This singular seed image contains both the best and the worst of the Piscean imagery. At its worst, it expresses dark qualities like self-pity, masochism, guilt, and martyrdom. These traits reflect the self-dissolving principle of water, but directed in a more destructive way. In some respects, the Piscean age could be called the ultimate age of neurosis, an era in which many believed suffering and guilt were somehow synonymous with spirituality. This is precisely a sort of delusion that arises when the ego is unhealthy or ungrounded and finds itself drawn back into the more corrosive and ego-dissolving emotions of the soul. I am going to go here to what it says, the Age of Aquarius, so that we have some contrast. The most frequently asked question concerning the Aquarian age is, when does it begin? That's a bit like determining when the dawn starts. Is it the morning sky that first, when the starts glowing long before the actual sunrise, or is it when the sun actually appears over the horizon? The same problem applies to understanding the timing of any great age. An age doesn't begin on a single day or year, but unfolds gradually over many years, or even centuries, exerting its influence in pronounced waves like the incoming tide. Consequently, the Aquarian age may not manifest fully for a couple more 100 more years. Anyway, there are clues to suggest that forces have been appearing in our world. And as I said, the internet's one of them. The rise of the internet is a current example, but we can see evidence even as far back as the American Revolution. Pisces is associated with water, Aquarius is associated with air. Outwardly, this is reflecting the startling rise of aviation technology and space travel over the last century. In a quite literal sense, humans are learning to master the air realm, not only with aviation, but through construction of even taller buildings that allow us to live higher off the ground than ever before. This media, or the media, also employs metaphors that say this elemental shift, that reflect this elemental shift when they say that a show is going on the air, or when a broadcaster is taking it to the airwaves. But these outer developments are really reflections of an inner shift taking place, one that relates to the awakening of the mind through culture. Symbolically understood, air is the medium through which we communicate ideas, and is the element most associated with rationality and thinking. This means that the Aquarian age will likely usher in major advances in humanity, intellectual growth, though probably at widely varying levels of sophistication. Someone living in front of a TV might be described as pursuing an existence, but in a vastly different way than the scientists struggling to unlock the mysteries of the cosmos. Terms like information superhighway or the information revolution are further examples of how the impending Aquarian influence has already begun to influence our mental values and modes of experience. The modern separation of church and state is another example of the disengaging of our rational minds from the dogmatic and emotional concerns of the Piscean age. A vital key towards understanding the meaning of Aquarius resides in the way in which all the different elements repeats itself 3 times over in the course of the zodiac. In other words, 3 signs, 3 water signs, 3 fire signs, 3 air signs. Each version of that element expresses itself in subtly different ways. Then it gets a little bit with it. Now it goes, symbols on the brink of Aquarius. This is the other one I want to read. With one foot in the Piscean age behind us, and the other with the Aquarian age ahead of us, we find ourselves caught between the radically contrasting value systems, and they are different quite a bit. If the great ages represent a Shakespearean drama of cosmic proportions, we've stepped on the stage precisely at the point between acts. Well put, I like that. When the old props and backdrops are being replaced by new ones. One result of this is the state will rise in this state is the rise of various traditional symbolic hybrids of the two. In other words, there's going to be both until the Aquarian age takes over completely. They speak of here of examples of basically fighting between Piscean and Aquarian, and also where they have combined televangelism. That's when old-style Piscean Christianity meets up with technology. We got televangelists. The abortion debate. The storming of the Bastille. Yeah, that's interesting. The storming of the Bastille. Sometimes even single events can serve as benchmarks. One of the earliest and most dramatic examples was the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, a pivotal event in the French Revolution. On this date, French radicals took over and opened up the famed prison which had been holding political prisoners and released those few that remained. In astrological symbolism, prisons are associated with Pisces, while the principles of freedom and revolution are associated with Aquarius. The opening up of a prison and release of its prisoners was a symbolic landmark in the move from the old authoritarian to a more freedom-oriented one. Interesting, last one here, Alcoholics Anonymous. That raised my eyebrows when I was reading this. For astrologers, one of the negative symbols associated with Pisces is the addiction to intoxicants like alcohol, addiction to intoxicants like alcohol, drugs, or even fossil fuels. Groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA as we all know it, offers an example of people coming together to break free of their addiction to alcohol, nicely symbolizing the effort to undo our bondage to Piscean consequences. Alcoholics Anonymous is thus a hybrid. It has one foot firmly planted in the values of the receding age, but also an emphasis on surrendering to a higher power, and not to mention its own brand of commandments. And at the same time, AA is committed to breaking free from the addictions and is essentially democratic and non-denominational. It's essentially democratic and non-denominational, all associated with the emerging Aquarian era. So, if you pay attention to history, I try to do this. You see as it says, sometimes you look at events. 9/11 would be a good example. Where does that fit into the grand scheme of things? When 9/11 happened, it's kind of like, it was, why did this happen? But once again, the further away you get something, it's already become clear in the what now, 17 years since it happened. What happened that day has become a little more in focus, why it happened. Of course, many people don't believe the full stories about 9/11, at least from the government. That's fine. I certainly don't. And it's okay to question. But, pay attention to the news and try to put events that seem to be like singular or not related to anything. There may be a few, but in perspective, especially once again, as we get further away from them, have a look at it, and you'll see there's some a grand scheme to all that's going on. Something is going on. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, and we'll see you next time.